The Israelis now say the young soldier they believed had been kidnapped by Hamas in Gaza was in fact killed in action. Both Israel and Hamas have said this weekend that they're determined to continue fighting. If you joined us at the beginning of the programme, you'll have heard our reports on the impact the Gaza conflict is having on opinion in the United States and on Palestinians living here. What about the Jewish community in this country? Trevor Barnes's report begins in Hampstead in North London.
On a balmy summer night in this corner of North London, the bright lights and pavement cafes suggest a relaxed community at ease with itself. But if you're British and Jewish right now, like those heading for a public meeting in the town hall up ahead, the surface calm is misleading.
British Jews are incredibly conflicted. I don't remember a time where people have felt so uncomfortable, uneasy, concerned, worried.
Hannah Weisfeld is the director of Yachad, a pro-Israel, pro-peace movement set up to build support for a two-state solution.
All the polling coming out of Israel shows that the majority of the Israel citizens are right behind the operation. And if anything, there is criticism coming from within certain elements of the Israeli cabinet that they should be in harder and stronger. It's very difficult for British Jews who feel a real sense of patriotism to stand up and say, we think something different.
The Board of Deputies of British Jews is similarly agonising over the violence and loss of life, but it has a clear position. Its Vice President is Jonathan Arkush.
This is not something which any Israeli wants, and it's not something which any British person wants. This is a war, and it's a tragic war, and it's appalling that in war innocent people get swept up in it and they become victims. But let me be clear, these are victims of Hamas, which is operating out of very heavily populated areas and is holding its own citizens hostage.
And if it's a rock and a hard place you're looking for, then the 100 or so British Jews here know where to find it.
Very difficult. It tears us apart. By profession, I'm a paediatrician, and to see injured children on the television, I've spent my life treating children, and it tears me apart.
My sister, who is Israeli and lives 5 kilometres from the Gaza border, they have no protected room in their little house. They are, compared to us, pretty right-wing and nationalistic, but they're heartbroken to see the number of Palestinian children who are being killed. The whole situation is tragic.
Liberal Rabbi Frank Dabber-Smith is just back from Israel, where, with members of his congregation, he's a frequent visitor, working, among other things, on a Friends of the Earth water project that's a focus for cooperation between Jews and Palestinians. Even so, the mood he's observed there is gloomy.
Israelis are very, very depressed, and there's a sense of, even if there's some sort of military victory and that the tunnels are destroyed and so on, what's next? So there's a feeling of there's no end in sight at all.
But there's another aspect to the current conflict that's lost on no one. The rise in anti-Semitism, from angry rhetoric and obscenities on social media to physical attacks in the street. Flying the Palestinian flag from town halls does little for community cohesion, according to Jonathan Arkush, but at an official level he is surprisingly heartened.
Fortunately and paradoxically, it has strengthened interfaith relations. We were very pleased to see Archbishop Justin Welby's very fair, very balanced statement. And even more significantly, perhaps, was last week's statement by the Muslim Council of Britain, which essentially said, we may have very different views and perspectives on the Middle East, but we must not allow that to express itself into anti-Semitism. And we have to stand united against importing the Middle East conflict into our country.
No subject in the UK divides Jews as much as what's going on with Israel, Palestine. And that's why my involvement is an expression of pragmatism and of conciliation. And rather than belly aching and making very emotional statements, we are, and my congregation very much supports me, in helping to bring people together from different sides to make relationships.
Rabbi Frank Dabber-Smith. As Yachad's public meeting broke up and people went home, not noticeably cheered, Hannah Weisfeld had optimism of a sort, though it'll take many more such meetings before all of Britain's Jews are convinced.
What we're trying to do is say to people, you don't have to pick sides. This is not a case of saying you're for the Palestinians or for the Israelis. We have to be, as a community, for peace. And I think that we have to do something to put humanity back into the conversation.
Hannah Weisfeld ending that report by Trevor Barnes.